I'm going to go ahead and start today's recorder. And welcome to our Women Leaders in Higher Education panel. I am Dr. Liz Cantu, and I am residential faculty here at Estrella Mountain Community College here in my virtual space of home. But I have the distinct privilege of being a part of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion team and the Diversity Advisory Council. I see a lot of my colleagues here as well. The way that it'll go today is I will be facilitating the discussion. We've got Dr. Rosslyn Knight, who is the District Director of Development Education. We also have Dr. Kathleen Iudicello, who is Estrella Mountain Community College's Interim Vice President of Academic Affairs. And we also have Professor Gina Desai, who is Glendale Community College Reading and Mass Communication Residential Faculty. So these are our wonderful panelists. And again, I welcome you to read a little bit more about their bios in the file that I put in the chat. I can put that on at the end as well, in case somebody was not in the Zoom when I did share that file. The other thing I would say is we want this to be a discussion where if you have questions, I now have my chat up. I invite you to put those in the chat, and I will do my best to try to monitor the chat as well so that we can give you the opportunity to also ask our wonderful panelists questions that you may have about what they're discussing in today's session. So it is March, the end of March, Women's History Month here at Estrella Mountain Community College. And we really felt it would be really important to give a space to women in higher education. One, because it has predominantly been, I want to say, as a men-dominated sort of industry. And, you know, this is an opportunity for us, again, to learn a little bit more of people that are across the district that have different perspectives. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started with, for our lovely panelists here today, when was your aha moment that led you to become a professional in higher education? Could you tell us a little bit about that journey?
So I'll jump in and go first. Thank you so much, Liz, and thank you everybody for being here, and thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this conversation. So I think for me, my journey to higher education, I guess, is kind of that saying how life comes full circle. So I had an amazing privilege to work in Sierra Leone, a small country in West Africa. It was my first experience as an educator with adult, what they call school leavers there, because school is not free. So if you can't afford school, as you get through to high school, many times people will leave because they don't have the resources to pay for school. But in the country, they have been working on making sure that people who did leave school still had some kind of job or employment or other ways to be productive members of society. So there was a organization that was working with a foundation here in the United States that was working on vocational training for adults. They were in the areas of secretarial skills, automotive, masonry, carpentry. Those were kind of the big areas in that particular country. And so I had the opportunity to teach English with students that were in the secretarial program, students that were in the masonry program and the carpentry program. So my very first professional experience in education was with adults. Once I finished that, I actually came back to the States and worked in elementary school, because that was really what I went to school for, was to work with children, but then had the opportunity to start teaching as an adjunct at several of the community colleges. Started actually at South Mountain teaching ESL in their Guadalupe Center, had an opportunity to work at Gateway and then at Rio. And then in 2013 became faculty chair of reading and ESL at Rio. So kind of coming back around to working with adults, you know, kind of where I started. So I just think just through that experience and through other experiences in the classroom, I just realized I do really love working with adults. As much as I love working with children, I realized that there was this wonderful experience working with adults that was just very different than working with children. So once I kind of finished in the classroom, spent time in Roosevelt School District as a district literacy specialist. And then I was just really just working with teachers, supporting new teachers, supporting teachers who needed additional help, working on curriculum development. Again, that kind of adult learning piece that I realized I really enjoyed that. I thought I would never leave elementary school. I was going to be an amazing kindergarten teacher, and but realized that the world of adult learning is just as powerful and just as important. So that was really kind of my journey, just again, coming full circle from where I started as an educator.
Thank you so much, Dr. Knight. And you've gotten a shout out as well about the amazing journey that you've had. And I'm going to connect this a little bit to Professor Gina Desai's background, because I know she's done some work with Teach for America and kind of maybe younger students than higher education. So maybe you could go next.
Okay, I'm happy to share. It's interesting because I was in a program that was specifically honing in on getting my Bachelor of Fine Arts. And that program specifically looked at media studies. And so while I was in my media studies, it's sometimes I connect so well to my students because when I entered into that program, I was a good student, but I never felt fully confident in all of my abilities to even think about being in like a master's program or that type of thing. And so in my 4th year, I started working with students, younger students that were potentially at risk in terms of entering into gangs. And I was working for the College of Education. And it's weird because I happened to be at the school with one of my mentees, and I walked outside and I was like, oh, wow, I'm supposed to be in this space. And it was just like an epiphany. I knew that I was supposed to be in that space as a teacher or, in that role of some sort of a leadership. I knew that I wanted to be a teacher. And so at that very same time, I had a professor, Dr. Lehman, and he came to me and he said, you're really great at media arts and you have a great lens when it comes to, analyzing different texts. And as I'm looking at your papers, you seem to have a great sense of gender and, cultural, studies and inequities. And he said, I really think you should enter into this master's program. And I had already come to this epiphany. So I was like, wait a minute. I am thinking I'm going to go the K-12 route. And I still remember like saying to him, I got to think about this. I don't know if this is a great idea. And so I went to him and I said, you know what? I think I'm going to turn down your offer for me to enter into this master's program studying gender and cultural studies. And he looked at me and he said, are you crazy? Nobody does that. And he's like, why? And I said, well, I've been working with these kids at youth, at risk, younger kids that are in middle school. And I just really feel like I need to inspire them or motivate them or do something for them. And he said, I want you to take a week and think about this because I think that it would be really beneficial for you to enter into this program and gain some experience. And, I don't know if it was I was lacking confidence or what, but I took that week and I think I was very, very sick that whole week, like feeling like I was ready to throw up or, make the wrong decision and, ruin my life. And yet at the same time, I went back to him and I said, I'm going to do it and I'm going to do it for the experience. And so I started out in this program and, it was really that belief and that mentoring that inspired me to join and to also feel like I could be a leader when it came to higher education. But I also never lost that hope of working with younger students. And so that's how I ended up getting involved with Teach for America. So when I was done with my master's program, even though I knew I would always have some sort of a job in higher education, I wanted to join Teach for America to find a way to give back and to inspire younger students that look like me, who are similar to me, and inspire them to believe in themselves, much like someone had already done for me. And so that was a key point in my life to where I was like, I know that these students can do all that they can to become what they want to be, but they just don't have someone believing in them or someone saying to them, this is what you are supposed to do. You can be successful. You can go to college. You can become, much like what I have already done. So I did it more to be an example, but also to inspire others to kind of follow in that like same pathway or legacy.
I love that. Thank you so much, Professor Desai. And some people have put about blazing your own trail. And I love the idea that you bring up that somebody approached you, right, about seeing a potential in you that maybe you didn't see in yourself. I can relate a little bit to that in terms of my mentor who encouraged me to get a PhD. And it's important, right, to share that with our students and with the individuals that we're a part of to sort of see how it is that sometimes we came through this journey. Somebody else planted a seed in us and that helped us grow into the professionals that we are today. VP Kathleen Iudicello, I know you were at Estrella when I actually started here as a faculty member in fall 2018. And then you went to Scottsdale and you came back and joined us recently. Tell us a little bit more about your aha moment and what has led you to be a professional in higher ed.
Sure, absolutely. I think that it originated from the experiences that I had in high school, actually, as a person who identified as LGBTQ. But of course, I'm very proud to be 52, so I don't mind identifying the time period. So that was in the mid-1980s, and that was a very difficult time to understand yourself in that lens. And I think it caused some damage to my self-esteem and to feeling valuable and valued in who I am. And so what was interesting is when I went to community college, at Scottsdale Community College, actually, I didn't see myself as an academic. I was hoping to be able to get into a trade to make a living, and I was very proud of that. And then I had a couple professors at Scottsdale Community College who recognized how much I love to read and critique texts and explore authors and perspectives and situations and stories from all over the world. And so I was encouraged by an English faculty member to pursue that as a line of study. And I really didn't think I could, but they kind of changed the way I saw myself. And one said, which I know now is the growth mindset, but told me that that I could shape my own intelligence and my own potential. The only reason someone else knew more than me or knew an answer I didn't is because they happened to learn it and I didn't. So learn it and do, right? And so that was really kind of eye-opening for me. I thought people were born brilliant, right? And born leaders and that sort of thing. And so I really tried to work on myself, but I was able to see myself being successful in higher ed as an academic. And so I have my master's degree and PhD degree in English, of course. And then in terms of instruction, when I went to Estrella Mountain as an adjunct faculty member, I realized how much I could share in terms of helping other students find their voices as well, regardless of what those voices are and how students identified. So I started the Gay Straight Alliance at Estrella Mountain, which was very difficult because it was hard to have people at that time agree to share their names or come to a public meeting, things like that. But we were able to have some events and we were able to have some community volunteer work. So that felt really good. And then I saw that becoming a division chair or faculty senate president, those experiences would allow me to have more of a reach to to pull out seats at the table for other people other than myself, right? As a white woman, I had privilege to gain that seat, and the privilege I had also of getting a PhD, right? So I think that, you know, that's important, and something that I learned that we need to do to be more inclusive and to allow our students to see themselves in what they do. And I think that when I was a dean at Estrella Mountain, I had an incredible aha experience. There was a student in a psychology class. The professor came to get me because she didn't know what to do, but this student wasn't feeling well. And then I had the instructor, you know, had the student come out to meet me in the hallway, and the student passed out in my arms and had a seizure. And it was because she didn't have enough to eat, because she had to leave where she was living because of an abusive situation. And she was also diabetic, but was faced medical insecurities, and so wasn't able to get the right treatment and understanding. And so, of course, we called the paramedics, and the student was fine and thriving. And I just admired her so much for taking that psychology exam, even when she was really hungry and knew she was diabetic, right? So this is the drive, and these are the stories and the people. This is what we're here to do, right? Is to help others while we're here and do the good that we can. And so that inspired me to expand my reach as a dean as much as I could, to help those I could, and then also to work towards being a vice president of academic affairs to support great work such as DEI efforts to really change the culture and focus on specific students who need our help. Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much. And also for the story, right? Sometimes we tend to forget the needs of our students and the complexities of their backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if maybe you've touched on this a little bit, but who have you found to support you and or inspire you on your career path? Perhaps at different points, or maybe even today. Sometimes I think when professionals get to a certain level, there's this idea that they don't need mentorship or they don't need that support. And, you know, so I'm curious to learn a little bit from you and obviously our panelists today on maybe who and how has that support helped you?
Mm-hmm. I was fortunate to have two mentors. They were both at Estrella Mountain when I was a faculty member and then a division chair. Pearl Williams, she was a founding reading faculty member at Estrella Mountain. And she really taught me how to teach. She saw me really upset in the hallway and asked what was wrong. And I told her that I had prepared the most amazing lecture, and I had like half of a legal pad that I read, and it was fabulous. And then she said, who wants to hear all that? What did they get to do? How did they interact with what you were teaching? And I said, well, they listened, and then they'll have an exam. And so, you know, luckily she was able to say, well, people need to actively process what you're teaching them. And so she just changed my life as a professor, and I'll never forget her for that. And then also when I was a division chair, Dr. Brian Tippett, who was a VPAA at Estrella Mountain Community College, took me under his wing and really inspired me to pursue a career in administration, to have the perspective of welcoming everyone to the table so that voices can be heard, but then actually change can be made even when that may stop your career for a while and push you back. That's happened to me as well. But I'm very grateful for his leadership and bringing caring to Estrella Mountain. He really brought caring into teaching, learning, and caring.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit of that. Professor Desai, do you have people or individuals who have helped you, or maybe even systems that have helped you through your journey?
So I have a couple. First of all, I would say I'd like to recognize my father, because my father always believed in me from day one. And he always told me, you know, you're outstanding. And he did say these things like he shared his own experience coming here from East Africa and like going to, he ended up entering into a master's program at UCLA. And he said, you know, when I first came to this country, I was an immigrant. And he's like, in this country, you are going to have to fight doubly hard because one, you are a daughter of an immigrant, but you are also a woman. And he goes, and women in this country are not always as respected as they should be. And he said, so when I push you, I'm pushing you because I believe in you. And I also want you to have everything that you need to be equipped to face, you know, what's to come. And that is, there are going to be people who discriminate against you. There are going to be people out there who don't necessarily believe in you or think that you're going to become successful. And he goes, so you have to equip yourself as best as you possibly can through your academics. And you have to work hard. He goes, even when you're sick, you have to go to work. And, you know, I received these lessons as a young child, and I'm so grateful that he gave those to me. But then, you know, there was a time frame in my life where he had to live out of state for a while. And that is when I kind of became a little bit more rebellious and didn't read as much. Like I was that kid who would go to the library with my dad, and basically he would say, okay, you're gonna read 5 books, right? And he goes, next week we're gonna go back and we're gonna read how many books? And I'd say 7. And then he'd say, okay, well, what are you going to read the following week? And I'd say 10. And I would always, you know, he would just challenge me and continually challenge me. And he taught me to read at 4 years old. And so I went into school very well equipped. But then when he was gone, I ended up kind of falling to the wayside and not necessarily having that belief system in myself that I should have. So when I did end up going to the university, and again, like I didn't do as well in high school. So I was like, you know, Dad, I think I'm going to go to community college. And he was like, nope, you're not going to community college. He's like, you're going to the university. And I just didn't have that faith or belief mindset in myself. And so he ended up talking to someone, because I think I had like a 2.46 or something. And he's like, he talked to them and he said, you know, you needed to have like a 2.5 or something like that to get in. And he talked to them and said, you know, would you be able to still accept her? Well, here I was 17 years old. So, you know, I started school very early. So I was 17 years old at the University of Arizona, and I hadn't done all the work that I should have in high school, but it gave me an opportunity to just kind of like immerse myself in my work and do all that I could to work even harder. And then I had those professors who believed in me. So, you know, as I entered my master's program, I worked for a Japanese cinema history professor, and he believed wholeheartedly in me. And he said, you know, you do such a good job in everything that you do. And so he goes, I'm going to nominate you for this, you know, graduate teaching assistant of the year award. And I was like, why me? There's like other people, like there's other people you could pick. And, you know, those mentors are key in terms of developing who we are. And so I think that is the greatest lesson that I've learned, in that I know that I have to be a mentor to my students as well, because I had mentors who believed in me and said, hey, I'm going to nominate you for this award. And that also kind of like cemented the belief mindset in that I could be successful and do what I wanted to do, you know. And mostly it's just to like, you know, help inspire our students to believe in themselves.
Thank you so much, Professor Desai. And I was smiling when you were talking about your dad, because I felt like your dad and my dad were the same, very similar messages.
Maybe they would have been friends.
They would have.
Yes, yes.
I was like, they come from the same school of thought. They come from that same sort of, you know, kind of motivating factor for us as women, especially being the newcomers to a country. So Dr. Knight, what could you state about the people that have supported you and the mentors, or even the systems that have helped in your journey?
Thank you. Thank you. I was going to say, Gina, your dad must have been on the phone with my dad, because and sharing stories and ways to support their daughters, because my late father, Leonard Gerald Knight, was very instrumental in everything that I've done, you know, throughout my life. He always believed in me, always told me that, you know, there's nothing that I couldn't do. And so I'm thankful to him. before he passed, we had a whole conversation about when I was going to get my doctorate. He's like, "You've been talking about it. When are you going to do it?" And unfortunately, I finished it after he passed, but I know he was there along the journey with me and cheering me on. So dads are definitely amazing. And I, of course, have to shout out my mom and my grandmother as well for being strong Black women and strong Black women role models for me, and understanding, what I was going to face, not just as a woman, but as a Black woman in America, that we are not post-racial here in America. We still have issues with that, but helping me to understand how I need to deal with that and the importance of taking care of myself and not letting those things impact who I am and how I feel about myself. So definitely a shout out to amazing Black women in my life. Then there's several people, throughout my career. I would have to acknowledge a former principal, Jody Bernhardt, who, and Gina knows Jody, who kind of gave me that first push around leadership. She asked me to be a coach at the school I was teaching at, and I was like, I don't want to do that. I just want to be in my own classroom and teach my own kids. I don't want to go anybody else's classroom and work with anybody else. And she was like, no, but I need you. I need you to take your skills and support others. And even though I didn't see that in myself, she saw it and pushed me until I said yes. It took a couple years, but I finally said yes. And I'm grateful for her belief in me and pushing me. And also, Interim President Kate Smith at Rio Salado College, who actually gave me my first leadership experience in higher ed as interim dean of academic affairs at Rio. Again, someone who believed in me and my skills and my ability and knowledge, and said, I need you to do this, to help us move forward. So, please consider this, think about this. And so I appreciate both of those women for showing me that maybe what I didn't see in myself and giving me those opportunities. So I think that's really important when you think about mentors, that sometimes they may not look like you. If they are willing to support you and they see something that maybe you don't see in yourself, that you believe them, that maybe the first time they say it, even if you don't think so. Sometimes people see things in you that you don't see. I think Dr. Iudicello and Gina both talked about that. Other people seeing something in you that you don't see. So definitely take advantage of those people, especially if you respect them and value their opinions. Don't shirk that off. Definitely take them up on those offers and take on that mentorship.
Thank you so much. And, you brought up the concept of self-care, which is so important. And I did see VP Iudicello mentioning that self-care is often something that we put in the back burner as people. However, a lot of research shows that women are doing I think at this point, I've heard some people talk about during the COVID-19 environment, there's like the fifth shift, right? So it's like taking care of yourself, your family, well, it's like your family, your parents, your children, the house, and now also teaching your kids at home, right? Is many of the wonderful roles and challenging roles that we face as women, perhaps, in society. I wonder if we could maybe talk a little bit about any gender-specific challenges, stereotypes, or barriers that you all have had to overcome during your career. And I know that's a lot, and it's a heavy question. However, one of the things maybe is higher education, right? We've talked a lot in certain circles, like especially diversity circles, how higher education was kind of founded as a men-dominated sort of industry and doesn't always take women's sort of perspectives and or roles into effect. And so just kind of wanting to understand a little bit about a little bit of the challenges. Oh,
I can start. So mostly I've experienced, I tend to experience a lot of, I guess, kind of a stereotype when it comes to my age. when I first, so, one of the things that I do is I dress up quite a bit. And I do dress up because when I first started teaching at the community college, I was, under 30. And I found that I would go to the library or I would go somewhere and I would try to go check out something, like check out a resource for my class. And I noticed that oftentimes someone would say, well, that's just for instructors or that's for faculty. And I would say, I am faculty. And they would look at me like, what do you mean you are faculty? No, I'm faculty. And I would hold up my badge just to like prove that I was faculty, because so often people would assume I'm also short. So I guess I have that barrier as well. And so I think that people would look at me as I was much younger than I was, or maybe not as qualified or as worthy of having that title. And, even when I can even think back to before I, started in higher ed, I, just learned from the, then on, I needed to kind of like up my game when it came to how I dressed and how I presented myself, because I knew that I wanted to be respected for what I did. And I also wanted to set an example for my students so that they would see how important it is that, when you're in this particular role, that you're setting an example for others. And even when I think back when I was an assistant principal at Phoenix Preparatory Academy. And I remember I was applying for a principal job. And I remember some of my colleagues even said, hey, put your hair up, wear glasses, do something for the interview, because you want to make sure that you look a little older and, look the part of being that principal. And, they say all the time, you want to look that part, but at the same time, I feel like when we start to make assumptions and stereotype people, it causes that own stigmatism that you have within yourself. And so it's really, really important for us to think about how that can be affecting all the, the individuals that we work with. And we want to be careful of not looking at our students in that way too, and making assumptions and, obviously creating these like misconceptions of who they are.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Professor Desai. A lot to say in terms of, people, again, maybe not feeling like you fit the role within higher education. Wondering if Dr. Knight or Dr. Iudicello could share a little bit more about their personal encounters or challenges that they've faced as they've gone through their career.
Sure, I will jump in here. And so I'll have to kind of go to the what Kimberly Crenshaw calls intersectionality. For me as a Black woman, that has probably been more of the challenge than my gender, my race. Kind of has always provided some challenge, unfortunately, because of stereotypes around Black women. They talk about the Jezebel, the Mammy, the Sapphire, if you've heard those stereotypes around Black women and what who we represent and who we are. So for me, that has probably been more of the challenge in helping and trying to help people see me for who I am, not for what they've seen on a video or in the media or what they maybe have learned throughout their lifetime about people who look like me, what we can do and are capable of. I'll tell a little story. When I first came to Maricopa, I was in a meeting with other faculty members, and a white male faculty member turned to me and said, "You are qualified, aren't you?" And it just took me back. It shocked me because never in my career had I had anybody, at least verbally and out loud, express, question, my capabilities or competence. I'm sure they did, in their minds, but no one had ever come out and point blank asked me if I was qualified for the position that I was in. And so it really just shocked me. I think I just said, well, aren't you qualified? Because why would I not be sitting in this group of people if I wasn't, qualified to be here? Thankfully it was not at the college that I was at. It was at a meeting, a district-wide meeting. But that was the first time that had happened to me. And it really took me back. It really, really shocked me. And just the fact that people would look at me, because at that point, all he knew was what I looked like because I hadn't opened my mouth yet. It was my first, meeting of this sort. And so all he knew was what he saw physically. And he'd already made an assumption about who I was, what my background possibly could have been, and what I would have to offer. And most likely saw that as all negative, didn't see anything positive in me as the only Black woman sitting in that room, having something to offer to that group of people. And so for me, the other side of that, when those things come to me, I immediately go to, if you think that of me, or you don't respect or value me as your colleague, how do you treat a student who walks into your classroom, whether it's physically or virtually, and looks like me? What is that experience for that student? Because how you made me feel, though I have my degrees in my teaching and all that, you still made me feel like I didn't belong, and here I am your equal. I have the same background as we talked, and, oh, wow, your experience, and you went to this school and did this, he ended up being amazed when he learned my background. I'm like, but your first interaction with me was very negative. And if I did not have the strength and fortitude that I have, and the people in my life that I have to tell me, yes, you're worthy and you belong here, what would that have done to me? And I think of students who sometimes don't have that. All of our students sometimes don't have these support systems that we're talking about. They may not have these mentors and people in their lives to buffer some of those types of things. So I kind of always think about that. What does this mean for students who look like me that walk into your space? Are you providing a welcoming, culturally relevant, culturally responsive space for those students who look like me?
Absolutely. And I think you've got a lot of people in the chat who are just sort of voicing that the perspective, right, of the way that you treat me is maybe an indicator of how you treat our students. And that's hard to maybe for us to kind of fully have that set in, right? That not all our students get the respect and neither do our colleagues, right, in terms of who their backgrounds are or the assumptions that people are making about them. So thank you so much for sharing that powerful story and for being kind of just so resilient to that, because I think that's something that often we have to do, right, is not let that doubt kind of come into us and be something that we internalize ourselves. VP Iudicello, would you have anything that you would like to share in regards to challenges, stereotypes, barriers that you have faced along your career?
Sure. It's interesting, isn't it? Being a woman in higher ed, I think that there are more of us there in leadership positions coming up, especially women of color. So students are able to see themselves in us, and all of you who are here, who are interested in this journey. I think in terms of a couple lessons that I learned through encounters, there are still often decisions made or conversations had where you should be included in your leadership role, but they're taking place on a Sunday on the golf course, and you weren't invited, or you didn't know that this was happening with different leaders. Nothing against golf and nothing against men playing golf on weekends. So good for everybody who plays golf. But just to say that if a decision shouldn't be made without everyone at the table. And I know I keep saying that about seats at the table, but it's so important, because how can, for example, we keep students at the center if we're not all around those students to support them, right? And be aware of them. And so I think that I would encourage women in higher education to definitely network, to have working conversations during the workday, but make time for each other to meet with each other, offer yourselves as mentors, learn from each other regardless of what your position is. I think that we really need to support each other. There are also situations where I've worked with people who haven't been able to be as flexible or understanding of my schedule as a single parent when I was a single parent. And that was difficult. I couldn't work from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. I already felt that mother's guilt of not being the mom who meets your kid at school for lunchtime, or is there for a painting exhibition or practice at school. And, so there's always that guilt. But I think that we need to really try to work with each other and respect each other and try to support each other's upward mobility in the field of higher education. We need to do all the good that we can for everyone while we're here, right? Because we're so privileged to have these jobs with insurance and a roof and education, right? We're not working outside. I mean, we just have such incredible opportunities to impact lives, even if that makes us not looked upon favorably. I've definitely had that experience as well for decisions and actions that I took as a leader, as a woman in higher education, but we need to kind of move through that. And I think that's why those professional networks are so important, so that you have someone you can call when that happens to you, because inevitably it will. And you can share that story and hear other stories and advice and help lift each other back up, right? To go back out and do that good work every single day. So the resiliency of Dr. Knight and Professor Desai it's so wonderful to hear. And I think those stories are so important to share in events like these, and with our students as well, and with each other, to really open up to create those strong bonds that allow us to support each other no matter what we're facing.
Absolutely, yes. And a lot of people are mentioning how important the professional network is, right? And the importance of sort of supporting each other across the journey and across the career, and kind of maybe being each other's sort of listening ear, as well as someone who can advocate for the decisions and or the role that you have. I wonder, since we've got about 15 minutes, if each of you could come up with one recommendation that higher education leaders to implement in service to promoting women in the workplace, what would you recommend? What would be that one thing that you feel can really help continue to transform the leadership structure of higher education in the United States?
I'll jump in and try and take this one. I don't know, I think one of the big things for me as I look at women in higher education, women in leadership, there seems to be an issue with culture and mindset. So I don't know how leaders do this, but really take a look at your culture. What does your culture believe about women in your workplace and workspace? Because if you don't value what women have to bring, how are you going to move them through those spaces? How are you going to move them into those positions if they're not seen as being valuable in those positions? So I think that whole idea around culture and mindset, really understanding the culture of your institution. Do you have a culture that's inclusive? Whether it's women, whether it's people of color, whether it's LGBTQ, what does your culture say? Because in many spaces, I think where women are in those leadership positions, it's still difficult to navigate because you have a culture that doesn't support women or doesn't see your value or believe that the initiatives that you're bringing forward are going to make a difference. So I think culture is really important. I don't know that we talk about it enough. What we believe and value and assume about people really makes a difference. I think it makes a difference to the experiences that women and people of color especially have when they are in positions. Do you feel supported? Do you feel like you have a network even within that space that's going to help you move things forward? Because we know it takes a team. It's not just a one woman or one man show. It takes everyone to move things forward. So really think about what what is the culture that you have in your workplace? And is it a culture, a positive culture for women?
Thank you. So I love that, the idea of really making the institution be a part of that work, right? And really see maybe where the gaps are, and if they do have strides to be inclusive, what do they need to do, right? We don't always have to have maybe necessarily the question. The question can also be a part of the leaders that are a part of that institution. So I do love that recommendation. Professor Desai?
So I just want to piggyback on what Dr. Knight said, because I think that culture is key. And one of the, I think that one of the detriments and, kind of that deficit mindset is that, women are competition. And so sometimes I don't necessarily think that we do a great job of bonding with one another and kind of helping one along. And so I think it's key that we start to consider what our own mindset is and how we view other women as well. And, we're already being discriminated against when it comes to, being in a, environment where it's highly dominated by males. So why aren't we doing more to empower one another? So finding ways to connect with one another, learn from one another, collaborate with one another, build that camaraderie amongst one another when it comes to being a female, because, there is a lot that we have to offer when when we're kind of excluded from the table. Find a way to bring that chair up and do all that you can to empower another female as well. And, cancel that culture out where we've been continually dominated and that we're viewed as we have to kind of fight against one another, opposed to actually collaborating and, honing in on what another person has to offer. So, I work a lot with Dr. Knight, and I'm very blessed to learn from her. And so I feel like just in having this conversation, Dr. Iudicello is here and I'm learning from both of you. And so I just feel like we have to do more to where we are, refining our own skills by working with each other and building one another up and finding ways to build a bridge and form that connection.
I love that. So, the idea that if there isn't a network, you build the network for yourself, and that's an opportunity to sort of connect with others. I really enjoy that. Thank you. Iudicello?
Yeah, I love what was shared by Dr. Knight and Professor Desai, and I couldn't agree more. We do need to build our own network. And I also have learned that we need to look out for one another when the culture is such that, we know that sexism and heterosexism are systemic, like racism in our society. They are everywhere, but to some people, it's ubiquitous, which we're working on with DEI efforts. It can be infuriating. But what I mean by keeping an eye out for each other is that if there is a comment made, say by another woman about a colleague's dress or heels or hair or blouse is too low, whatever it may be, whether it is a male or a female who makes that statement, take the time to stop and check it with that person in a way that won't embarrass them unless they make it in public, and then still speak respectfully, of course, right? But I do think, just like professors, as you do in the classroom, when a student makes a comment that is racist or sexist, we take the time to encourage that student to think differently and understand, and we carve out that time. I think that as leaders in higher education, women need to carve out that space in conversation, whether it's one-on-one or whether it is having that learning moment in a very careful way in a public meeting, whatever it may be. I just think that we need to help shape how people see us as women, even if we're not involved and that person you're talking about never knows that you intervened after the meeting later, right? That doesn't matter. What matters is that hopefully that person will be treated differently, and other people who dress like her will be treated differently by the person we were speaking to, you know? So I know that's a lot of generalities, but I really do think that taking that time makes a collective difference in trying to shape or adjust the lenses through which male identified people see female identified people.
Yes, and I know at an institution I was before, there was actually a conference all focused on women and women in the profession, to have these kind of critical discussions and dialogues about how to manage up, how to, build a network of support, how to maybe not, as Professor Desai and also you, Dr. Iudicello, have mentioned, right? How to not see each other as competition, more how do we support each other, right? Kind of reframing the conversation. That's actually something I find interesting that we, I think, could use maybe as a professional development opportunity, whether it is on our campus or across our district. Somebody in the chat had mentioned about after COVID, right? Hopefully there will be some flexibility and grace that has been granted because of the fact that we've had to take on even more roles in this environment, and so again, I think part of that is perhaps us being that kind of unified voice, right? To really say, like, this is where I need support, or if I'm not able to be at my desk from 8 to 5, but I can be there from 9 to 7, that I'm still doing the work and it's still being done. Anyway, so I'm just kind of framing it here as trying to figure out ways to kind of weave all the things that you all are saying. I know we've got about 5 minutes left. I wanted to know if you all have any parting words or maybe advice for anybody here that's in the room, that takeaways that you feel from the last hour that we've been together, especially because we have so many leaders and women and men in the room as well.
I'll go ahead. I would say just keep learning from one another and keep listening to people's stories. So the more stories that we have, I think we're gaining a better sense of who people are as individuals, and we're all different. And, make sure that you're listening to your students' stories and understanding their experience, because the greatest asset you can be as an instructor or as a mentor is to be able to listen to someone's story, and applaud them for their journey, but also to have empathy for where they are, where they've come from, and where they're going. So that's what I would say.
And I did peek into the chat and I saw someone asked about experiences with imposter syndrome. So Stace, thanks for that question. I think for me, definitely getting my doctorate kind of put me in that. I went through a wonderful program at San Diego State University with Dr. Luke Wood and Dr. Frank Harris III, but I was the oldest person in my cohort, having not been in school for about 30 years. So I did have those questions. Do I belong here? Is this the right place for me? Am I going to finish this doctorate, in this 3 years? Because I'm working and I'm, trying to do this doctorate. Is this the right place for me? And I have to say, the cohort of people I was with were extremely supportive, and really made me a part of that family. So they're still my extended family, and so just. Again, I think I said it earlier, like sometimes you don't believe in what you can do. And sometimes it takes others to see that in you. So, don't doubt yourself. If you see an opportunity, take it. I mean, it took me 10 years to decide to go back and get my doctorate. I think it's the best decision I made. I finished it 2 months before my 50th birthday. So you're never too old. My mother actually is completing her doctorate right now at Walden University, and she's 72. So you're never too old to do it. So please just remember to reach for the stars. You know, whatever it is that you want to do, go out there and do it. You know, find that support group, find those people that you can have around you. There are several people on this call who are part of my support group: Professor Desai, Stephen Pice, Ana Quinones. They're part of my support, the people I reach out to, you know, when I'm struggling with something and I need that sense of you got it, go girl. So find those people who do that for you and provide that for you. I know this pandemic has really created lots of situations for people with mental health, with different types of feelings. Please don't let that stop you. Please reach out and get that support that you need. Don't feel bad about that, you know, but find those people who can be your go girls or go boys, or who can be there to support you. That's so, so, so important in this world, in this time. So please, please, please do that. If you have the desire to get a doctorate degree, do it. I think it's one of the best decisions and the best things that I did in my life, career-wise, personal-wise. So definitely take on that. I went to actually a leadership conference several years ago, primarily African Americans. And one of the things that they told us, if you want to be in the club, you got to get the card. And they were talking about getting your doctorate. So I wanted to be in the club, so I got my card. So definitely get your card so you can be a part of the club, whatever club it is that you want to be in. Get that card so that you have those doors open to you, and do not be afraid of that.
That's amazing. Thank you. And Dr. Iudicello?
Oh, I love what Professor Desai said and what Dr. Knight said, and I would echo that and add to it to say that when you look around and some folks don't look like you, who are in positions that are higher than yours, I would suggest that you actively become part of the conversation, like add yourself to those conversations, and let's work to remind each other that as women, we're not imposters as leaders in higher education. And that if you apply several times for a vice president of academic affairs position, for example, if you don't get those positions, even though I think a night of ice cream and donuts is awesome, you know, the next day, don't exercise, just go back there and figure out what you can do better and how you can interview better, and rely on that network to remind you, and so we can remind each other that we're not imposters and we have so much to offer based on our unique experiences shaped by that shape our perspectives. And I think that, and keeping that strong network and bringing others into that network regarding of their position in the organization, but women who are interested, who are doing good work, reach out to them, right? When you see someone doing something good, reach out and give them opportunities to expand that good work to benefit as many people as possible. And I think that's really the key to what we can do as leaders in higher education.
Wonder. The mute. Thank you so much for being a part of today's panel. A lot of us are inspired. You've given a lot for us to think about, but also a lot for us to be inspired by and look forward to as women in higher education, as well as colleagues in higher education, because I know we have several men in the room as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for being a part of today's programming. I did put the bios of our wonderful panelists here in the chat as well. I will say that hopefully you will come to some other amazing Women's History Month. I know for Estrella Mountain, we've got a couple more and starting next week. And across the different campuses. I think that some of them have also programming happening through April just because of the tech issues that we've had. Thank you all. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you soon at another event. And thank you, Dr. Knight, Dr. Iudicello, and Professor Desai for all of your amazing words and for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.